And it is time for the Monday Smash, doing it old school with my partner, Ira Schoffel. There he is, brought to you by our friend, Russ Vorhis. Russ, hey guys, not only is Russ a kick-ass State Farm agent and a guy you should call, and you see the number there, he's a huge dude. That's a mountain of a man. That's he's a big time guy. He could start at tackle for us right now.
I think he was a basketball player back in the day. I think he spent a little bit of time here with the Noles, but yeah, he definitely could play tackle or guard at this point.
Yeah, Russ is a monster. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good. Just still kind of just kind of getting back in the swing of things from the end of football season. It feels, it's the great tweet last night. I think it was from one of the college football Reddit accounts or PFF or somebody that pointed out that once that game was over, we won't get football again until Florida State plays in Dublin against Georgia Tech, which is pretty cool, man. It's cool that the Noles will be on the big stage when we get back in this sport.
Yeah, and one thing I have liked about the lengthening of, the NFL did this a while ago. I brought this up today on the JCS, which is that they slowly started taking over certain months and weeks and days of the non-football calendar year and started making it their own. And they're like, oh, well, the Super Bowl just ended, but coming up next, you got to find out how everybody's going to do for the combine and who's going to be ready for the draft. And you have the actual draft, and then mini camp happens. And then, and it's just next thing you know, they're kicking off the season and you haven't been without football at all for a year. It's starting to happen in college football with the way that the transfer rules work and, all the stuff that goes on at all times. You're like, well, you have so you have the old school national signing day, but then you have, and that doesn't really even matter anymore. But then you have the new signing day, and then of course the transfer portal signing day, and then in spring there's another opportunity for people to transfer. So rosters change yet again after spring, and people realize, oh, I'm not going to start here. Maybe I'll transfer. So then Florida State may get another great player from somewhere else. They've already done that multiple times. Plus, you're worried about your own roster having somebody leave because they're not happy with playing time at the end of spring. And the next thing you know, it's effing June, dude, and we're planning to fly to Ireland.
And you have, the coaches have had to, I don't know when this started. I guess it was probably 10, 15 years ago when college football became year-round as far as training goes. Then the coaches had to come up with branding for their different workouts at different times a year because like it used to be football season would end. They might get a little bit, a few days off or a couple weeks off, whatever. Then they get in the weight room. Then they would do that for a while. Then they would do some conditioning and then get ready for spring practice. But now that's got to be called, Jimbo had fourth quarter drills. I think Willie's was the chase, maybe something like that. Then Mike Norvell's got tour of duty, but you have to kind of come up with some sort of name for that period of time to kind of re-energize the kids because so they don't remember the idea that they practice every single day of the entire calendar year. Because then this will go right up to spring practice, which will be kind of like the second or third week of March. Then they'll have spring practice for a month. Then they'll get into all their summer workouts.
Yeah, man, I did it last year when we got done with spring. Like you're practically in May. And when you're in May, football starts to come on the mind. You're like, oh, it's May. Here we go. And I know Corey doesn't do that. Hell, he's got to be 3 weeks into the season before he realizes football's here. The rest of us sitting around salivating, dreaming of football of any kind. You get as close to June, you can see football. You're like, I see it. I know it's almost here. And so you get excited about it.
We used to get the magazines, but I don't know. Are we doing You used to have your system, right? You go to the bookstore and check out all the magazines. I don't know if you can't do that anymore.
I don't think I think they make them.
There's a few. But, man, think about when those magazines – and I've written for Athlon for a long time. But, their deadlines usually are in April.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, imagine what that looks like now. I mean, Keon Coleman couldn't have been in Florida State's last year.
Yeah, it's got to suck, right? What's his face do anymore? He was the one who took over all the magazines. He was the man.
Oh,
the giant thick one where he'd tell you people's records on a full moon in the rain.
Dude, we're getting old. I can't remember.
That dude, what's his name? Steele.
Get
off me, buddy. There it is. Steel Trap. Yeah. So he used to Phil Steele, right? That's his name, Phil Steele. He used to email me way back in my NLS days, and he'd be like, you want me to come on? And I had him on twice. No offense, Phil Steele. Boring as hell. And I remember thinking, I'm not having Phil on again, but he would still email me every year, and it made me sad because I'd have to be like, "Oh, can't do it this time, Phil," and you're trying to make excuses.
Well, and the great, I mean, one of the best things he had was he was, I think, the originator at least of a public uh, magazine or book that really broke down the returning starters and
Yes.
returning snaps and all that, which is so important. And I think gamblers would do it on their own, but he had it there for you in the book. But again, now, man, he's got to go to press at some point, and how many people have changed teams during that time? And then you got into how do you even quantify what a returning starter is or returning starts or all that? Because what if, Florida State brings in the kid from Harvard and he started for 2 years, but those don't really count as Florida State starts.
Right.
So now, there's just so much, like so many variables now compared to what it was just even 5-6 years ago.
You were about to curse there. It's okay.
I was too. I was.
Yeah, we're not going to.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet. But we might. Hey, Don, I see you sitting there in the chat. Don's good people, by the way. I may be doing some things with Don here in the not too distant future, but he's a man who knows tequila, Ira, and thus he's a man we need to know. And he's offering up tequila.
I appreciate the people that are trying to like wean me off the Don Julio because they can tell I like it so much. They're a little worried about me, so they're trying to find me a higher shelf. I don't know. I think Don Julio should be on the top shelf, but apparently maybe it's not.
I don't want you to ever go away from having the noise go away. I need that to be a permanent fixture on the Smash. Do we think the baseball team makes Omaha, writes Tony? I don't know, man. It's half that's luck anyhow. I swear to God. There's some Florida State baseball teams that had no business going out to Omaha that made it, and others that could have won the whole thing and should have that didn't get there. It's so frustrating. It's hard to project that early on. They're going to be better, man. They're going to be better. I will tell you that. I can definitively say they're going to be a much better baseball team than they were last year. Whether or not that gets them to Omaha, I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of excitement about some of the arms. I think there's excitement about some of the bats. I think there's some excitement about some positions defensively. I don't know that it's a sure, it's everything's perfect. I don't know that this is going to be a team that, again, like Link, the team at Notre Dame that he took to the College World Series and, knocked off Tennessee and all that. Like, I think that was a very
did the world a favor by knocking off that BS Tennessee team. Most unlikable, organized team in the history of sports.
He did do the Lord's work there.
Yeah.
But I think it seemed like that was a very complete team. I don't know that this is still a very complete team. He's 1 year in, basically. This is his second season. But the first one was really kind of a wash. And so I don't think it's what they want all across the board. But it should be much better than it was last year. And yeah, like you said, though, man, the challenge is going to be if you get paired up with one of these, if you're not hosting and you get paired up, you get sent to Athens or LSU or, one of these SEC schools that are paying, a fortune for their NIL, for their rosters. It's still going to be a challenge.
So I think this about the non-football playing sports at FSU all the time until we can get out of the ACC. It's part of my overriding concern. As a Nole, I want all the teams to be good. I've rather enjoyed watching soccer win national championships, plural. I've enjoyed watching the softball team whoop ass and take conference titles and win a national championship and get out to the World Series. I've enjoyed all of that. I liked it when Leonard Hamilton had it rolling and the basketball team was good, and we could go in the TLC CC and see high caliber basketball. I like it when the women play well and when the track team's good. But my great fear is for everybody that's not football, while we're in this sorry-ass league making no money, that slowly that begins to wane, and you do get scared about it. And you bring up the point about baseball. It reminds me of conversations I had ages ago with teams that just didn't invest in football. And, luckily Florida State's always invested in football, but you would hear the disparity in terms of the infrastructure and what they were trying to accomplish and what they could accomplish based on the money. And LSU, Ira, amongst several others in the SEC, they care deeply about having success in college baseball. And I don't know that Florida State can have the kind of program they want to have as long as they're in this conference.
It's going to be a challenge, man. You think of, again, like I think Link's a very good coach. I think he's got a good blueprint for what he wants to do. So that gives you a better chance. Again, as long as the circumstances are what they are. But the reality is, I mean, if there's a kid in the transfer portal that because it's, and people here we talk about baseball. To your point, I've heard about it in softball. Like there are softball players that have a really good year somewhere. This is, I mean, as far away from a revenue sport as you can get. Baseball, if you've got a good baseball team, you could break even financially. So you could even make an argument that, you know what, if we put a lot of NIL money into baseball, we could actually make some money back in baseball. Softball, in almost every program, I know for sure, I've seen the numbers of Florida State, it loses a lot of money. They just can't recoup it because they can't sell enough seats. There's not enough room in the stadium.
Yeah.
So you're already going to be losing money in softball to then turn around and start putting a lot of NIL money into it. I mean, that's a challenge, especially when you already need more NIL money in the revenue producing sports. But there are some schools out there that maybe don't care as much about football or don't have, these other sports, or maybe they're in a conference where they're making so much money they can devote it to softball. But there are softball players, they're athletes in other sports that are very non-revenue sports that, are getting major NIL deals. And so that's going to be a challenge, man. And I think, like, to your point, if Florida State gets in the Big Ten or gets in the SEC and that those numbers start to even out, then that's a different conversation. But for right now, I think it is going to be a challenge.
Had some guys ask some good questions here. I answered the first one from Tony, or we were in the midst of answering that one. Let's go to Brett. He writes, Jaden Smith signed in December, not an early enrollee, requested and got a release from his NLI today. Can he sign in the May portal window? He's not in the portal.
Yeah, I would assume so. I don't see why not. I mean, it's a unique situation. We were talking about this. I was talking about this recently with some people at FSU, just in terms of these guys, these players that early enroll, and they're, even if they're on your campus, but then say they change their mind in the spring. Mm-hmm. Like, how do they count in terms of scholarships? There's a lot of stuff that we're all working through. I don't know the specifics about that one, but I don't see why he wouldn't be able to. I mean, why would he not be able to?
It seems everything goes. So I just assume anymore that if a person decides one day that he just doesn't like the lay of the land, he can ride on out.
What he might be in that situation is he might be somebody that doesn't even sign a national letter of intent. Like, like the early enrollees, traditionally they don't sign a letter of intent. They just enroll, or the transfers just enroll. They don't actually sign a letter of intent in most cases. So it could be that where he just enrolls somewhere in the fall. But if he's out of it, he's out of his NLI, then he should be able to free to do whatever he wants.
Noel Fan 91. Good evening, gentlemen. I was wondering if there was any update on the standalone football facility. That's Ira's thing. Come on, tell us about the standalone, buddy. Let's go.
Just drive down. What is it, Champions Way or whatever it is? Yeah, they're constructing. It's well underway. They've torn up one of the football fields. They're shut down the parking lot, which is too much to our chagrin. Mm-hmm. But it's they're in the process. They're doing all the work now. It's actually work you can see. Big machinery digging up ground, and then they're going to be it's going to be built over the course of from now through August of 2025. So basically, in the spring, Florida State's going to be practicing in a construction zone. In the fall, they're going to be kind of practicing in a construction zone. Basically, there's, for people that haven't seen the practice fields, there's the doke construction, but right next to there, so that's going on. But then there's also the practice field construction. But for people that haven't been out there, there's 2 full-length practice fields, and then there's the indoor facility, which is a full-length practice field also.
Unlike Miami, Florida State has an entire football field that they practice on that's indoors. It's not 70 yards. It's a full 100.
It's not 60.
Not 60. It's a full 100.
So one of those outdoor fields basically is going to be off limits for now. So they're going to have the one full outdoor field. Then they'll have the indoor facility that they can still practice in during the construction. And then when it's over, they're still not going to go back to 3 full fields. I think that third one is going to be like a little bit shorter because that building, the way it's being built around it, is going to cut off. But that's plenty. I mean, they don't need 3 full fields for practice.
I just want everybody to know, because Ira, you do a good job of telling everybody the way things work behind the scenes. Here you go, guys. I'll give you another one. You've never seen the amount of bird shooting. Now, not literally shooting birds, but bird shooting like this.
Yeah.
That you see in the parking lot from media members towards one another as we all look for parking spaces to cover this football program. It's on the one hand,
I think I've gotten a couple birds from you in that parking lot.
I think I've received a smirk on your face as you smiled and watched me suffer. And as you pulled in and grabbed the spot that I was about to take.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, and this is a testament to, for the most part, how well we all get along on the beat covering Florida State, whether it's Warchant or other sites. We pretty much all get along. Not everybody loves each other, but we pretty much get along. And so it's open bird season when people are steady taking – like we get along that well where you could do it and nobody's going to fight you. You're not like fighting for a space in Miami or Tampa. Like you could just, it's all right.
Nobody's pulling out a pistol.
Nobody's pulling a piece.
But you know what, though? I think now, though, it is so limited now by the construction that it's all a shared experience now. Like we're all in misery. Like we'll commiserate now about, because this has only been for the last couple of weeks that it's been this way. Where'd you get a spot? Oh, you had to park by Madison Social? Okay, well, I had to park in the far garage. Like Aslan's completely given up on campus. He's parking in a garage 3 blocks away.
Is he parking at the garage that we all park at?
Yes.
Football? Okay,
yes.
So across from the softball fields. Yeah.
Because he's just like, what's the point? So yeah, it's a challenging time. Life's tough for a sports writer these days.
Yeah, I love it. Lee writes, oh, here we go. This is a nice segue. Guys, I thought last year's football team took training seriously, yet Mike's recent comments have me excited about this year's team and mindset. What are your thoughts? Well, Ira, you just saw the man over in Orlando, so that brings us to the crux of the conversation this evening. I was not there. I've seen the video, but I wasn't there. Talk to me about what your impressions were, and then Lee's specific comments here that he's really excited about how hard they're working, or at least Mike's descriptors of their work.
Yeah, and Coach Norvell, when we went down and talked to him in Orlando on Saturday, did say that this is easily the best first month of winter workouts that they've had since he's been here. Best tour of duty since they've been at Florida State, and I think and it's not just talk, because they do have measurements. Like they have the GPS tracking software, so they can tell like how much exertion guys are putting out, how many reps they're able to do, what velocity and explosiveness of their movements.
I'm glad they didn't have that when I played, Ira.
They would know when you're dogging it.
We all did, man. Every player out there had a moment. We would each give each other the look like, hey, man, it's hot out here. And we just kind of go through the motions on this one and we'll be all right. But now they would bust our ass.
they would. Yeah, it's a different era. But yeah, so they actually have the data to back it up. And he says the workload's better than it's been anytime since they've been here. And as far as what that means, I think it means two things. One is that should happen. It should be getting better every year. Because, you think back to 4 years ago, it was a COVID year. Then, 3 years ago, it's been constant, and then get the players learning it and then bringing in better players and then them learning it. And now you're at a point now where the roster is better. And I also think one positive, it's probably helping it also, is you did bring in a lot of players from other programs where they work really hard. So you bring in 5 guys from Alabama. I'm guessing it wasn't a huge adjustment. Mike Norvell said there is still some adjustment because anytime you go from one workout to another one, it's different. But you're bringing in 5 guys from Alabama, a guy from LSU, a guy from Georgia. You're bringing in guys that have been at elite programs. So that's probably helping as well, as compared to bringing in players from, FCS schools or Charlotte or wherever.
There's nothing new under the sun, so I would be bleeding people dry if they played at a place like Georgia or Alabama, because let's not pretend those haven't been the 2 most dominant programs in college football over the last several years. I would want to learn. It's a fine line. You have your own way of doing things. You have your own modus operandi. Mike has his philosophies. He's not going to abandon any of those, but you would want to learn how things were operating, for good or for bad, at these other places where they've had a ton of success. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, Alex Atkins has talked about this a lot. I'm sure the other coaches do it as well, but Atkins has talked about it a lot. He talked about it when Dylan Gibbons came in from Notre Dame, and he's done it with other guys as well. And he'll, when they're going over things in the meeting room, he'll let them explain how they were taught this. How did you guys run this play? How did you guys teach this? How did they teach you this? And then he would kind of sometimes apply some of that. Maybe
Yeah.
that makes more sense, or maybe, yeah. So no, it's a good point. And yeah, you're bringing in guys from, and I'm sure the same thing happens when these Florida State guys go elsewhere. I'm sure those schools are hitting them up for information because Florida State's obviously doing a lot of good things too.
Keith writes, with the Power Two on the brink of emerging, is there a chance we see schools get relegated, move the Vanderbilts of the college football world out, and bring the FSU and Clemson's in? It's funny, Keith. I've thought about it. I've thought about where this is headed, and in my mind, it was a bit like, European soccer where you could relegate. It wouldn't be called that, but I do think to some degree we are probably headed there with the universities that are going to invest in a world where it is uber competitive, it's semi-pro, it is the money we talk about on a daily basis. Those that want to do that and those that just don't. They don't see it as their vision for the long-term goals of the university. And a school like Wake Forest, for example, as much as they may want to lobby in the press of their rapid growth, we see otherwise in terms of the stadium and the investment from the fans and all that. Yeah. I'm using them just because I want to take a shot. But honestly, that you got to believe that there's a future where we're covering this sport, and there are two very different kinds of football being played on Saturdays and two very different leagues almost.
Yeah, I think some of like you're saying, I think some of these decisions will be easier than others. I think some schools like Vandy, Wake Forest, maybe Northwestern, there's some of these schools that might decide, we don't really have an appetite for paying these players exorbitant amounts of money. Maybe we'll step out and play in this other league. And then, obviously a lot of the schools that do want to do it will want to be into it. The question will be like schools in the middle that will really want to be there, but maybe they just don't bring enough. At some point there's just not enough, food for all the mouths at the table. And so that would be a challenge, is like who gets kicked to the curb that wants to be there.
That's why SMU, Ira, was so quick to jump on. I mean, they were like, we'll take anything, whatever. Just let us in a Power 5 league. We got to get the hell up out of here. And they did it. Now, they have money. They will invest. They care. There are going to be schools. I don't know which ones. But, like some of the prestigious academic institutions that don't like this model are going to be torn between this is not how we view college athletics and what we ever thought this should be. And, oh, by the way, we're currently making $1 gazillion thanks to football, and I don't want to give that up.
Right, exactly. Vanderbilt's like, you know what? We're cool in the SEC. This is fine.
We'll take that ass kicking.
Exactly. I also, there's already something in place sort of to differentiate between like the football bowl subdivision FBS and the FCS. It's the number of scholarships they can provide.
Correct.
And I think there are some other regulations in terms of like investment. So maybe you could create a scenario. And again, we now have the SEC and the Big Ten joining forces to have these meetings behind closed doors.
But they don't want to replace the NCAA
for the good of the sport.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they come up, or the powers that be come up with a structure where, okay, if you want to apply to be in this new power structure, this is what you have to commit to. And you've got to have a stadium with 60,000 seats.
Right.
And you've got to invest that amount of money every year. I think it's all on the table. I mean, right? I mean, everything's on the table other than, being a Power 5, I think, from a few years from now. It's hard to imagine that that's going to be the case. Keith,
you joke goodbye Miami. They can't be out here with that slap dick of a practice facility expecting anybody to take them seriously now. They don't even have an on-campus facility. They don't have an on-campus stadium. They can't make it. Sorry, guys. But just think, Miami, you get to dominate the Wakes of the world moving forward in whatever this other brand of football you're going to be playing in the future is. That'd be great.
They're finally going to fill up that trophy cabinet.
You get to do it. You'll get to do it. So what did you take away from Mike? What did you like? What did you hear? What's something that stood out to you? And before you answer that question, this is a teaser in the business, folks.
Ooh.
Let's hear from Russ Vorhis. Let's do it. Let's hear it. Let's hear the jingle.
Contact Russ Vorhis for an auto quote today.
Russ, good people, does a good job. Give him a call today. You see the numbers on your screen. Got to get insurance from somebody. You might as well get it from a good guy who's a Nole, knows what he's doing, he's going to do you right. All right, here we go.
Real quick, though, for the podcast listeners also, because they can't see the screen, Russ has offices. He's got offices in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park, but he services the tri-state area. Do we call it that? Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. I mean, we can make it up.
You can make it up.
Yeah. The other tri-state area. Yeah. And if any insurance needs you have, Russ will take care of. He's got a great staff as well. They're very big on customer service and answering your questions, and they do a really good job. The website is russvorhis.com, RUSSVORHIS.com. And the numbers in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park, it's like back in the day, Jeff, you pumping the numbers for
904-834-4282. That's 904-834-4282. In Orange Park, 904-276-9535.
First caller gets tickets to WrestleMania.
Yeah. Third caller, fourth caller, whatever it was. I used to use the call-in factor to F with producers. So certain producers that would be filling in, if I didn't like them as much, I'd be like, caller 14. So they'd have to answer 14 calls and tell people they weren't the winner just to hear the disappointment. And they would flick me off the way we do in the parking lot more. And then others, if you really like a guy, you're like, first caller, come on, first caller wins.
First caller is the way to go, I think.
Yeah.
So as far as Norvell goes, he's definitely fired up. I mean, there's no question. I mean, when is he not? So that's not a big surprise. But, you can definitely tell that he is real excited about the workouts. He offered up a couple of things. Like, he's like, look, I haven't had to make any motivational speeches. And that was one thing I wondered about a little bit, man, about the hangover, about this from the snub. I mean, I wondered a little bit if, because look, man, there's a big part of the reason a lot of those guys didn't play in the bowl game, the guys that moved on to the next level, they were devastated about the snub, and they were mad about the situation. And then you had the rest of the team that stayed that had to go wear that ass beating.
Oh boy.
And then, hey, you're going to get a few days off, and now let's get back into workouts and tour duty. Like, I just kind of wondered if there would be any kind of malaise that they had to break through. And he said, man, not at all. It's been, they're hungry. He loves it. And so again, I mean, I think he's really fired up.
Well, he's got something that he still wants to accomplish. Obviously, he's got a commitment from the university, and almost more of a commitment than anybody in college football. I mean, he's right up there amongst the elite in terms of pay. So he knows that they're all in, and he knows he's got a good team, and they continue to improve the roster. I think you're right, though, Ira. I think in the offseason anymore, guys have all got to want to get after it. They got to be self-motivated. Right. It's not like the old days. I'm 52 years old. I can remember the days, and I only played 1 year of college football, but I remember when they were telling us when we had to arrive at FSU about these workouts, and they said they were voluntary. And then the first day I got up there, I was like, well, these are voluntary. I'm going to get to know the city. And the guy laughed at me. One of the players was like, dude, there's no such thing as voluntary workouts. What's wrong with you? You ever plan to play here? It's like – and so that's now commonplace year-round where everybody works out at all times. You got to want to do that, but also that's the only way you're going to get to where you want to go. And anybody going to Florida State wants to play in the NFL. They just do.
100%. I actually just had this conversation with somebody recently over there about that topic, just about, that Norvell does a good job of getting these kids who buy into his message and they want to work hard and all that. And the person said, yeah, that's 100% true. But also if they're on our radar at Florida State, they work hard. Yeah, they wouldn't have gotten to this point if they weren't going to work hard. So that's a big part of it. But also, I think the camaraderie is a big thing. He also, just talking about the quarterbacks, and I haven't written this. I'm not sure if I will. I may write it later. But he was really good about just the experience for Brock Glenn this past year, going through what he had to go through those last two games, starting the AC Championship game, starting against Georgia in the Orange Bowl, and he's very high on him. And you wonder sometimes when a guy gets thrown in that situation and if it could shake their confidence. I mean, that kid was on the other side of a 63-3 loss. I mean, it's brutal. And he doesn't have, like Mike Norvell was the head coach that day, but he's won games. He's won championships.
Significant games, yeah.
So he can wear that a little bit differently than a kid thrown out there in that situation. And so, but he said he's been more and more impressed by the way Brock Glenn handled that. And I think it was a good sign the way, we've talked about at the time, but the way he improved from the AC Championship game to the Orange Bowl, even though the score wouldn't reflect it. He looked a lot better and a lot more in control in the Orange Bowl than he did in Charlotte. And according to Norvell, he's gotten stronger since then. And so, Norvell also, every time DJ Uyunglele came up, Norvell would bring up, Brock and Luke also, so I don't think, when we talk to him before spring practice starts, I don't think he's going to be, oh yeah, DJ's been anointed, no question the starter. I think he's presented just based the way he was talking. I think he's presented to all three of them is that it is wide open, although it would be obviously a huge upset if one of them won.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that Brock has a good attitude about it because it could go south in a hurry. Not only did you get thrown to the wolves in two situations where you were set up for failure, you were on the wrong end of an ass beating that will forever live in infamy, for a lot of people, and you're probably a little frustrated by that. But then they go out and recruit over you with a guy that's played a ton of football, which is in essence saying you're going to be waiting another year because we're bringing in a bridge. Now, he can tell them that they can compete, and I'm sure they will. And he wants them to, but you could see where the kid could look at that and go, man, that's not cool. I mean, I wasn't even told I was going to start in the ACC championship game until like the night before. And I got thrown out there and was not prepared at all. And then I just had to go out there and be a sacrificial lamb. And now you bring in this guy. I'm a little frustrated, but that's not the attitude that he's had.
Yeah. And in fact, he also brought up the fact that Brock also missed part of the year due to his hand injuries. So, not only was thrown into that situation, but he also didn't even get the full freshman year as normal. I think Bennett just popped a question up there about the difference between true freshmen and redshirt freshmen and how they've done. R. Wilmer asked, did Mike speak on how the redshirt, true freshmen, and transfer wideouts perform in the tour of duty? He didn't go into specifics about them, but one thing he did talk about was the freshmen and transfers. They did something new this year, which he said they've never really done in the past, but they've never had so many newcomers before. They actually broke the freshmen and the transfers into a separate group, and it had a little bit modified tour of duty. So it's not like it was easy. It just, instead of, because the way, and we've been in there before and people have probably seen some of the videos, a lot of it is you're in groups. And so if you've got 28 or 30 newcomers out there kind of muddying up everything else for everybody else, it's just going to diminish the work. So they broke those guys off for the first month, and they're going to introduce them all into this month. But he sounded thrilled with the whole group. But this week will be the first time that all the newcomers will be with all the returning guys.
Man, when we go through, and you guys did a great job of amassing all of the interviews and getting those posted up there. I know you and Aslan and everybody that worked on that, I want to give credit to. I certainly wasn't over there getting those interviews.
And all I did was ask questions. Aslan, Ben, and Matt did, or Ben and Tom did all the heavy lifting.
Did a lot of good work and got those things up very quickly, and there was a great response to that. And we're working hard. We're putting our people to work. We're doing all the things we can to get you the information you want. But the point is, if you're a Florida State fan and you live wherever you live, maybe you live in Atlanta, maybe you live in Chicago, maybe you live in Orlando, whatever, you sit down and you click on it, you go to Warchant, you click on the interviews, and then you're looking at all those, and you just had to walk away. If you went one by one by one by one by one, you just walked away feeling good, feeling good about the kids, feeling good about the way that they kind of handled those interviews. But also, if you just look at who they are, their names, where they came from, how highly touted they were, transfers, what universities they came from, what positions they played, how productive they've been, why they chose Florida State. When you put that all together, I just think you feel very, very confident that Florida State's going to be in a position to compete for the conference title again, and maybe perhaps, and certainly in a 12-team playoff this year, make the college football playoff. I don't think I think there were some thoughts going into the offseason that perhaps Florida State would take a significant step back, but I don't believe that's true at all.
Yeah, it's. I find myself asking myself a little bit, like how much we can put into that and how much we shouldn't put into that, because you're right, man. Almost all of them have been very impressive. Even the guys that have not, clearly this is not comfortable to them to stand up and look, it wouldn't be comfortable for most people at 18 or 19 or even 20 years old to come into a room of people you don't know. You've got a camera, you've got people with cameras in the back of the room. You've got a Zoom camera over here. You've got somebody asking you questions from Zoom. You've got these reporters you don't know sitting around the room. Some of them are 30 years older than you.
Mhm.
And so it's got to be a weird situation. And almost all of them handle it extremely well. Even the ones that aren't super talkative, you could tell they're sharp kids. So that is all good and important. I think again, like you don't want to get too carried away though, because we do have to see it. Like we have to see it on the field. Now, physically on the hoof, some of these guys look phenomenal. I mean, you're bringing in those defensive linemen they brought in are all
Yes.
super impressive physically. Some of these skill guys, we know the speed. We've seen the times that, they've got 4 kids that they brought in that all run around 10.6 or lower in the 100 in high school. They may be faster now. So you can see all that. You can feel some tangible, but until you really see them on the field, it's hard to know, right?
I think you're right to phrase it that way, Ira, that's all we can do is, okay, let's see how they handle questions. Let's see how mature they are. Let's see, how worldly they are. Let's just see what their mental makeup is. But then from there, you're really just looking, it's a football game. I mean, we're talking about athletes. This is about talent acquisition, size, speed, strength. This is how you win the line of scrimmage. This is how you win games. They've raised the floor of talent. And when you look at the guys and you think back 2 years ago to when you were doing this to where you are now, the athletes look different. They all look the part. A lot of them look the part now. That matters, man. It's football. I know there's the all getting off the bus team jokes that we've all made about certain players that look the part that can't play. But I promise you, if you stockpile a bunch of 4- and 5-star kids and you're molding that clay, as opposed to finding diamonds in the rough everywhere you look so you can get something pieced together, you have a lot better chance to win some damn football games. And so they've got dudes now.
Yeah, it's and again, I always bring him up because because it's an easy comparison, but I feel bad for it because I love the kid. But like Keyshawn Helton had the best makeup you'd ever could ask for.
Right.
But he also was a small, undersized slot receiver, that just really couldn't be, just for all the physical reasons, the catch radius, the physicality, all those reasons, was going to have a hard time succeeding at this level. But yeah, you think about where you were 2 or 3 years ago, it's completely different. What I like the fact that, when you bring in, you're going to have to replace obviously a lot of production on offense and some really good players on defense. But I do think on both sides of the ball, you've got such a strong nucleus. You've got basically just about almost your whole offensive line back, including some new pieces there. You look at the receiver core, the talent you brought in there. The running back room returns a lot, and then you brought in new pieces there. And then obviously defensively, you've done a really good work up front with all those defensive linemen, the linebacker from Alabama. So yeah, man, it's back to your original point about like the expectations for this season. I don't think it's crazy to think that they should compete for the ACC, and I don't know that. Yeah, at the end of the regular season, I wouldn't have thought we would have that conversation. Right.
Let's get to some questions that have been highlighted here in the chat that I've been remiss to overlook here. Let's start. Well, I see. Do I see that right? Yeah, that's Elise. She's asking us. Thank you, by the way, Elise. Appreciate you. Interested in our thoughts on Kelsey's interaction with the coach last night. She would have him bodyguarding for Taylor Swift. He's not going to do that because Taylor. Excuse me. I should mute myself. Answer the question, Ira.
The interaction, I don't know. Like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I think the whole thing was, it looked worse than it was because Andy Reid, like, was off balance and, like, stunned by it or whatever. And then they're showing it in slow motion. It wasn't like he ran him over. I think he was just, it seemed like one of those, hey, get me the damn ball. Why was I not in the game on that play? And we're down there at the goal line. I need to be in the game. Those relationships, if you're a coach and a player, we saw, at the college level, Jameis and Jimbo would have conversations like that. So certainly guys that have been in the league for 10 years and their head coach, they've won Super Bowls together. I wasn't that bothered by it, but I don't know. I think I saw Boomer or one of the guys in the studio didn't like it. But
it's a bad look, and it can be thought of as disrespectful. I think it looked bad because, like you said, Andy was about to fall over.
Right.
I'm not a Kelsey guy, so it lent itself to my narrative anyhow. So I was like, yep, classless piece of garbage as always. So, but I will tell you, that's a little much.
It is a little much.
It's not the end of the world, but that looks like a crazy person. Get it together, Travis. Get it together. But of course, at the end of the day, they win Super Bowls with that guy, and he ended up with, at the time, he had 1 catch. He ended up with 9 he was their leading receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty good second half. It was weird though. Like there were times in that game when I thought he looked a little slow, and I thought I thought the Niners really did a good job of disguising things, especially in the first half. It seemed like it was really. I think the Chiefs didn't know what they were looking at, and a lot of times going into plays, but they started to figure it out in the second half, and then he became.
Yeah, he became a
who he
focal
normally
point
is.
in the last couple of drives, especially. Yeah, they were running zone. San Francisco was, and did a good job winning up front. But then when you don't put them away, you can't let good teams hang around. You can't let great quarterbacks hang around. And I thought the 49ers could have gone up by a couple scores twice, and they didn't. And that was, that was going to come back to haunt them. Joseph writes, hey, y'all, where do you think Jordan Travis ranks in jersey sales all time at FSU? Golly, I don't know. Ira, do you know that?
I don't know. And it's hard to compare right now because up until just a few years ago, they couldn't sell guys jerseys while they were still in school. So, they might sell 5 jerseys when Jameis was here, but you were buying, I don't know you're buying
black market stuff. You're getting people.
You're buying like whoever wore 5-10 years old, Preston Parker,
right?
Allegedly, because you weren't really supposed to sell their numbers and their jerseys while they were in college. But it's probably going to be hard to compare in terms of like where they are now compared to guys, when they were coming out of college. But it'll be up there, man. I think he's beloved in a special way that I didn't expect. I knew people liked him, but I feel like especially him getting hurt, and then the way he handled all that, like it was already like up here, but I think that maybe even pushed him to a higher level. So I think, he's going to do real well. I don't know where it would be right now though.
Yeah. And he also is a guy that handled, like you said, all the stuff with dignity. And, I also think that I always like a guy who gets a lot better, and he got a lot better every year. He just kept getting better. Yeah. So, the work is there, you care about the work, you care about the production. He had all of that. And then he had the cool personality for the fan base to latch on to, because he loved his teammates. He loved Florida State.
Norvell had a little jab at a reporter asked. Basically, they said when we were talking to him, somebody said, at DJ's last school, he got benched, and there are some fans that probably don't think he's going to be able to play at a high level or whatever. And Norvell's like, yeah, well, there were a lot of people that didn't think Jordan Travis was going to play at a high level, and he did pretty well. So it was just, what's that?
I was going to say, did you pipe up and saying you were one of them, Mike?
No, I did not. But I like when when Norvell throws it back at a reporter every once in a
while. Don writes, will the 12-team playoff coincide with the transfer portal window next season? Do you see the portal window changing due to this? Good question. It's Dan.
That is a good question. Yeah, I don't know if they'll do it the way they did it this past year or not. It's a good question. I should know the answer to that. I just hadn't really thought about it, and I'm not 100% sure if they've said it. But the way they did it for this year was it was open for, I think, like 5 extra days after the playoff teams played their last playoff game. So like when Alabama lost their playoff game, it opened up for 5 days, and then of course when Saban retired, it opened up for 30. So, but it may just do that. They may just stagger it from those days. There's just more of them. There's going to be 6 teams eliminated right off the bat, and then those teams, and then you stagger it from there. But I don't have the right answer. Sorry about that.
Justin writes, is it best or wise to invest in a transfer player that will be with us for a year, or to invest in a player that will/can be with us for years? Depends on the player, depends on the need, but depends on the position. I think that you absolutely will have years where it's very wise to invest in a top flight 1 year only wide receiver named Keon Coleman, or Jermaine Johnson. And other years you would say, you know what? I want to build as much as I possibly can with multi-year players, preferably 5-star high school kids. I think we're seeing that certain positions are more readily available, and the talent at that position is greater in high school, and you build them up as you bring them in. Offensive linemen, a lot of the ones that get drafted highly that you see go on and be all-American types and go to the NFL, many of them were just 5-star elite high school recruits that committed to a school like Georgia or wherever they went, Alabama, and went through 4 years, 5 years, and went on to the NFL. but it's not the same every year, and you got to kind of judge what your needs are and how pressing those needs are. So it's a player for player, year for year thing, I believe, for a coach to decide what he's got coming back.
Yeah.
What's the impact of a player coming in from outside of the program that's a junior when you have a sophomore that committed to you out of high school and has been with you for 2 years, and he's going to have to now compete with the guy? You got to know that kid. You got to know how he's going to handle that. You may love that kid and think that long-term that kid's the answer, but he's just not quite ready yet, and you're going to bring in this guy. Well, how does he decide to leave? Can you handle that? I mean, it's tough. It's a really difficult task for these coaches.
Yeah, and I think it's changed from year to year, and especially this year now, because as of now, they have unlimited transfers. So you can't even – it used to be up until now, if you brought in a Fentrell Cypress, or you brought in a Jarian Jones or whoever it was, they had already transferred once.
They weren't going anywhere.
They weren't going anywhere until if they got their degree, they could go somewhere as a grad transfer. But now you could bring in a guy this year and think a lot of these guys they brought in this year have multiple years left. Well, that doesn't mean they're going to be here for all those years. They could still bail after one season. So I don't know that you can look at it from a standpoint of, I'm going to get 3 years with this guy, because you don't know if you're going to get more than 1 year with him. I think you're just getting guys that you think can help you win. And if they have multiple years, then the better.
Peter writes, last year someone asked me how I thought we would be in 2023 to 2022, and I said we were 10 points better. I guess that was reversed. So we're 10 points better. Do you see us being better or to equal or less than we were the prior year? That's Pete the Greek, as he writes. Listen, I said that I thought the offense might be better, and I cited many reasons for that. It wasn't a singular thing. I thought they really were beset by injury last year in a way that was much more expansive than people realized. And they knew they had a good defense. They knew they could lean on that defense. They didn't want to get Jordan hurt, so they didn't get to unleash the totality of what Jordan could be, because they didn't need to. They weren't pressed into doing so. And so I just think, it's a rude thing for me to say it this way, but you're bringing in a one-year rental who's 255 pounds. If you want to run him, you run him. I'm sorry. That's one guy. There are many others that I would talk about. I think the offensive line has to be healthier. We know they've infused it with some more players. I just don't know how this offense couldn't be healthier at almost every effing position, because they just were riddled with injury. Serious stuff guys were playing through last year.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like you have to talk about last season's offense in two separate seasons, because there was the first month,
right?
The LSU game. They looked phenomenal early in the season, but you started getting injuries like 3 or 4 weeks into Jaheim Bell and Keon Coleman and across the board, and then the offensive line never really could get healthy. So yeah, so I think it's you're evaluating based on. We never saw a full season of what that offense could have looked like.
Correct.
If you look at I think it's a crapshoot, man, going into this year. I know you've said that you think this offense could be better than it was last year, and I think it could be, especially the offense we saw the last 7-8 games, which was not a real dynamic offense.
And that's a large part of the season.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So I agree with you. But it is like so many variables, and you look, I can definitely make the argument that it will be better, because again, better than the big picture offense, not just that first month,
right?
Or what that offense could have been. Because if you look at it, the offensive line should be better, right? I think it should be better. They brought in some really experienced offensive linemen to go with. Now, one thing nobody really talks about, but I think is important to note, Jeremiah Byers was in his first year in this system with Alex Atkins. So he should be better this year. Even though he's played 4 years of college football,
right.
We may see a nice jump from him going into year 2. Then you talk about, the guys that they've got, Darius Washington turned into one of the best offensive linemen in the conference. If Robert Scott's healthy, if Maurice is healthy, you bring in these guys from Florida and Alabama, these other offensive linemen. So the offensive line should be better this year. I think that's safe to say. I think the receivers aren't going to be better, though. There's going to be more speed, probably not going to be better. running back's probably not going to be better, I wouldn't think. I mean,
Well, there
better
may not be a Trey Benson, but I think by
right.
committee they could be more productive because you have a healthier offensive line. You have other facets of the offense that will
Right.
create some balance.
No, you're right. And then Norvell and Atkins scheme it up really well to help the backs. No, you're right about that. And then DJ is probably, it's going to be a drop off from Jordan. So it's hard to say it's going to be better, but it could be. I mean, it certainly could be because you do have some really nice building blocks. So if some of those guys step up and some of the young receivers like Hakeem Williams and Destin Hill and Van Dravius Jacobs and those guys, any of those guys emerge, now you're really talking. So it's just
yeah. And I will tell you that I am banking on the fact that Hakeem Williams is going to become a star pretty quick. I mean, admittedly, baked into my assessment of this offense taking a step forward are all the injury things that we've talked about, but also that I think we would have seen it this past year. I think towards the end of the year, you would have seen, especially as the other guys got hurt, when Johnny got banged up, if Hakeem had been really, really healthy, and he wasn't, you could have seen him fast-tracked. When Keon ended up having his injury and really became a kind of shell of who he was in the first part of the season, I think Hakeem could have been counted on there. You could have rested Keon a little bit if you needed to. I think they were on the precipice of doing that when he got hurt.
right.
And then I happen to think, too, that, you just named three guys that I think will all take a big step forward. So that's where I'm banking. You're right. You got to see it in games. But I do think that they will. And then you brought in some pieces, and you really created the ability to stretch the field because now you have real speed here. They did not have that last year. Changes the dynamic of your offense. Teams have to guard every facet of that field now that you got a quarterback who's got that's the throw he makes, right? Yeah. He's got that big arm down the field, and you got speed to stretch him. And hopefully if the offensive line's healthy and better, you should be able to run the ball. I do think it's there. And it's a distinct possibility.
I wouldn't argue against it. It's hard for me to predict it just because haven't seen it.
Well, all right, you just need to get on board with this optimism, buddy. Let's ride. Kayvon wants to know what we're drinking. Man, it's Monday after the Super Bowl. I'm drinking water. I'm not lying to you. I'm drinking
some artesian water right here, buddy.
There you go. Look at it. There you go. We got our delivery today, Ira. There you go.
We did.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm just drinking water. Other smashes will have alcohol-free and Flowly, just not tonight, Kayvon. It was the Super Bowl, and, everybody gets a little loose on Super Bowl Sunday, so, that's the way it works.
Hey, speaking of the Super Bowl, though, I am happy that the last quarter and a half happened, though, man. The first half was a snooze fest. I mean, it was bad.
Yeah, the defenses were carrying the day.
Yeah.
I can live with both. I'm glad we got both in a way, because then it made the second half all the more exhilarating into the overtime. It's only the second time the Super Bowl's gone to overtime. And I'm a big fan of if I don't care about the two teams and I don't care about either one of those two teams, I just want to see a damn game that is riveting to the end. And you got that at the end. So I'll take that. Although I'm done with Kansas City now. We can move it along.
Would you have, before the end of regulation, would you have gone for it on fourth down or would you kick the field goal?
So with 6 seconds, you think,
go for it on third down because you had 6 seconds. You had a play to burn if you want to try to take a shot.
Yeah, normally you would trust Mahomes there to know the time. But I will tell you, one of the reasons that you were hard-pressed with time was because he made an ill-advised decision to take off when they didn't have timeouts, and he got tackled. Remember that?
That wasn't good. Yeah.
So maybe he was thinking, I don't know, man.
Can't have that happen.
And the new rules mean I'm definitely going to get a possession, and I've got the better quarterback. I'll kick the field goal. We'll play for overtime. I like my chances. I think that's probably what went into it. But I thought about it too. I said to my wife, I said, man, if this were a regular season where the rules aren't the same as they are in the playoffs, I think he goes for another play and tries to win the game right there.
Right.
But so it was fun. It was fun. Anything else we should touch on, Ira, before we say goodnight for the evening here? I can't believe an hour has flown past.
No, man, just the baseball opening weekend is this weekend coming up. Softball, just for people who weren't paying attention, they opened up the last weekend, and I guess like Thursday or Friday they opened up and had a bunch of kind of thrilling wins. Our guy Aslan, I think, is going down to Clearwater this week. He's going home,
Oh, he's going
Clearwater.
home. Nice.
He's
Good for him.
gonna go check out that tournament. They're playing like 3 or 4 other
Yeah, they've done it
top
the
5
last couple
teams.
years.
Yeah. So he's gonna go down there. And then, like, we'll say we'll have baseball coverage, and then basketball. I think basketball's on the road tomorrow, but I think they're on this weekend. So a lot of other sports going on, and then more interviews. As you mentioned, all those football interviews. We got a group of them tomorrow, and then a group on Wednesday. And in that group of players that we're going to be interviewing on Wednesday is DJ Uyunglele. It's going to be our first chance since he's become a Seminole and been going through the workouts and everything. We're going to get to hear from him and talk to him on Wednesday, which should be a lot of fun. So it's going to be a busy week at the site.
Yeah, man, it's happening quick. It's all flying by. February's flying. And next thing you know, we'll be watching spring football practice. It'll be cool. So make sure you come to warchant.com to check out all the goodness. It is new every day, Warchant TV. Listen to Wake Up Warchant. Seminole Headlines is on tomorrow. That is you, me, and Corey. And then
I think our guy might be in town. I think we might all be in the studio.
I'm not sure I'm buying it.
We'll see. We'll find out.
I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, so Seminole Headlines tomorrow, Jeff Cameron Show throughout the rest of the week too. So we've got plenty of stuff for you. Warchant.com, Warchant TV. Like, subscribe, celebrate, do all the good things, and give Russ a call. Russ is good people. He's intimidating, but he's good people. He'll do the right thing for you. For Ira Schoffel, good job, Ben. I'm Jeff. You guys be well. Take care. Peace.